Hello, product people. Welcome to the Product for Product podcast, hosted by Matt Green, data advocate and product manager, and Masha Mikanovsky, product leader and author. Our goal is to serve the product community by helping you find products that can help make your work in product management easier. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Product for Product podcast.
Welcome back. On today's episode, Michelle and I are speaking with author, founder, and coach Gil Broza about how to make product management unlock organizations' potential. So let's dive in. How are you, Gil?
Hi, how are you?
Doing wonderful. Hey, Michelle.
Hey, Matt. Hey, Gil. Welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm excited to have you on the show. Another Torontonian. I always have to mention that, right? When we have Torontonians on the show.
Well,
Right.
Torontonians refer to the city as the center of the universe, right?
Of
Oh,
course.
there we go.
So we have to perpetuate the myth.
We just have to bring more
No.
Atlanta people here, though. I
Yes,
think
we do.
that's a challenge that we have,
Yeah.
or I have, to bring more
Mhm.
Atlanta.
No, we do. No, we are nice people. I think we accept that there are other people other than Torontonians.
A few.
Look down on the
So,
USA below.
Yeah. We met a while ago, I think. I think about the time, maybe even before I wrote and published my book, and you gave me some great feedback on my book.
Mhm.
You're an author as well.
Mhm.
This is and first of all, you have a new book, so we're going to talk about that. But this is your fourth book already, right?
It is. I wrote my first one 11 years ago, and since then it's been fairly even every 4 years,
Very nice.
with
Nice.
some sampling errors. Yes.
Very nice. It took me 8 years to publish my first one, so you see, I'm very slow.
Yeah, well, so mine is nonfiction and super specialized, right? It's for managers in technology. You wrote fiction.
Mhm.
I can't even imagine myself writing fiction. I wouldn't even know where to start.
Mhm.
So good for you.
Thank you. But we're here to talk about you and not about me. So first, tell our audience, who you are and how did you get to where you are?
Okay. So I specialize in helping leaders deliver better results, and specifically by upgrading their ways of working. I started way back when as a developer. I managed people, I managed teams, and around the year 2000, I discovered Agile, back in the day when extreme programming was the thing, not Scrum.
Mhm.
And so very, hardcore tech development. And pretty much in the last 20 years, I've been helping organizations improve. And my particular side of things is the choices that we make as we do our work and how they affect our results. So
Mhm.
Agile to me is a specific set of choices, which is, adaptability and value delivery and collaboration and evolution and customer centricity and whatever. It's not, meet up every day for 15 minutes and stand and recite stuff. That's not the thing for me.
Mhm.
So my angle, what I bring to organizations is the people-first approach, right?
Mhm.
Really seeing the system of work as primarily made up of people. They are not resources.
Mhm.
Right? They are
Right.
human beings, like
Yes.
the managers,
Yes.
right? They include the managers.
Always good to remember.
Yes.
Mhm.
And one additional angle that I have been bringing in the last few years, and this is really a key thing in the book, is really this whole idea of system thinking. Not in the academic sense or, being very theoretical, but simply being mindful that work happens in a system, not in a bunch of functions and specialties.
Mhm.
Work is never the result of people handing stuff off to the next person in line. I mean,
Mhm.
it might happen this way, but it's never the entire picture.
Yeah.
So the new book is very much about how do we improve this system,
Right.
which includes product people, engineers, architects,
Mhm.
content people,
Right.
SREs, you name it.
Yeah, but before we dive into the new book, which is really very centered about that, just a few more words about agility and being agile. I was also involved in some company transformation. I love how you said before upgrade. upgrade the way they do things.
Yes.
That's an
Yes.
interesting way to say that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very, very deliberately chosen. Yes.
I'm sure. But I've been involved in being part of it and then leading one. And I was very well, first of all, in the beginning, I was just practicing it without even knowing I'm doing Agile. Or because I didn't do Scrum, I was just very, it was more about the agility and releasing often and getting feedback and stuff like that. It wasn't so much about the process. Once I learned the process in the first company that I did that, I became a bit too religious with the process. And then I implemented it in another place. And then I got really, really frustrated. And one of the reasons I realized since then, and I'm always telling people, is that agility is not about the delivery or the developers, but agility is about the product. I always like to say it's about the product. I think to extend that it's really about the system that deliver and how they make decisions and stuff like that. But people many times, most of the time that I've seen it anyway, when they decide to do Scrum or to be agile and stuff like that, it's just limited to how they deliver something. It's just that part of the flow, but everything else, everything around them, all the decision making is not part of that.
Right. So product is not always part of the implementation. Management is not always part of the implementation. So, you can put developers and testers together. You can lump your architects in there, your data people, fine. But that is just one portion of the entire value delivery system. Now, to be fair, Scrum, for instance, does say you do have product representation, and that product representative, the PO, right, actually owns a whole lot. Now, we might argue about, well, do they own everything? Do they own some of it? Do they work collaboratively or not? But they are supposed to be there.
Yeah.
So from that angle, it's okay, right? But then you do have to allow for the fact that your system probably includes a few more people, again, such as management, which Scrum doesn't really recognize, right? So the analogy I like to give people is, imagine that you're making a movie. What comes at the end of every movie? Credits. The credits are never just the actors, the screenwriter, the director, the producer. It's also the people who moved stuff around. And if we want to take it to an extreme, I don't know if they actually write this in movie credits, but the people who feed everybody else are super important, because if
they do. Yeah, I think they do.
Fine. Like the catering, right?
Yeah, the catering. Yeah.
Let's imagine, just to demonstrate the effects of a system, let's imagine that in catering, they decide to cut costs. So they switch providers, and now lunch, instead of getting in at 1, gets in at 2 o'clock because of whatever, but they pay less for it. Now you have actors going hungrier for 1 hour or eating junk food or whatever. That will affect your end result.
Yes.
And the same thing happens in product development. You can have somebody make a decision in design, in testing, in I don't know where, and that decision can have ramifications theoretically everywhere. In every system, we should even be able to kind of identify where it went and what affected what.
Or even if you're talking about, catering, the one thing I was thinking in a system like software development is IT deciding to switch off the internet in the office, in the middle of the day or whatever, without telling anyone, because that's kind of thing you think like is not part of it, but it will affect everyone.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. Everything in an organization will affect things in the organization. So the organization is a system.
Right.
We already have, quite a lot of literature around that. Not a lot of it is system focused. A lot of it is actually focused on slicing up the organizations into functions and optimizing them piecemeal, which is not a winning proposition, but fine.
Yes.
The problem is that we also, on the other hand, have pretty strong focus on just teams. Just teams. And that's not enough, because you can optimize a single team and sub-optimize for the whole. I have seen this myself plenty. For instance, you might have a team with a Scrum Master, and the Scrum Master is doing what they're supposed to do, which is, manage impediments and help the team along and get them what they need so they can finish stuff and all that.
Right.
To which end, the Scrum Master may, let's say, rely on personal connection with IT or with architects who are not on the team because there's too few of them or whatever. And the Scrum Master kind of gets everybody in and makes sure that this team works really well. But then all the people that he roped in and changed their workload, now they're not doing what they're supposed to do to help everybody else in the organization, everybody else in the value delivery system. And you might actually be hurting the whole thing. So this book focuses on, again, it's like the credit roll for a movie. IT would probably not be in there because even though they kind of affect things, they don't actually have much of a say. And by which, okay, let's just clarify that we mean IT as in, the servers, right? And provisioning and things like that, not IT as and the developers in a business organization. That's not what I mean. So everybody who makes calls that affect the end result, that's not just product managers, they're part of the system.
Yeah.
Yep. So when I think about Agile, I think about flexibility. To go back to your point on if a catering shows up an hour later, you might have to be flexible enough in that system to maybe have a bigger breakfast or change the time of breakfast delivery to accommodate that. So when I think about Agile, I think about flexibility.
And that is, those are, of course, good, but there's a third option, which is maybe when they work on changing the catering, they check with their colleagues and they say, hey, if lunch came an hour late, would that be an issue? Some people might say, no, it's fine. Some people would say, hey, that's actually better. And others would say, no, that means more donuts.
Right.
So we're going to crash. We're going to eat junk food. We're not going to think straight after the donut. Who knows?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I want the same thing for our listeners. I want, let's say, a director of engineering who wants to optimize engineering to also have conversations with the director of product and say, hey, we're thinking of whatever. How is this going to affect you? For better, for worse, or maybe not at all?
Yeah. Yeah. So how do we define, where are the edges of the system? And one of the things you're mentioning also in the book is that there is, unfortunately, in the industry, there is no good word to say this is this, right? So we know there is sales, there is marketing, but then when we get to developing the product, we have delivery, we have developers, we have the teams, we have DevOps, we have QA squads, we have architects, we have designers, we have everyone. I usually try to use the word product team, but then I have to tell people also a product team is not just the product people, it is also include the other people, and it might not include additional people in different levels that need to be part of that system.
Of course. Yeah, we are terrible at naming, right? So
we're good at technology, but
fine. Okay, so you need to define the scope of your system, right? And you actually gave us a lot of the answers as to who is in that scope. Basically, anybody who makes a call that affects the eventual deliverable, such as a product, that is going to make a difference to our customers, whether it's the paying customers or indirectly through our colleagues who use the product for the benefit of those customers. So you simply need to see who is involved. But the other thing is this. The system is not just the people, and it's not just the process either. It's both. So it's the people, their interactions, individuals and interactions. That's that, by the way. Okay. It's how they interact, which also means how they work together. It's also every level of management that is involved and actually makes decisions there. All of this together comprises your system. Okay. So for instance, your car is a system, right? It has parts, right? But the parts interact in some way. The transmission interacts with the gears in some way and eventually with the wheels and all of that. So it's not just we have parts, it's also how they connect, which is why, sometimes trying to plug and play different things. I'm dating myself here with plug and play, I know, but still, humor me. By replacing a part, let's say we're going to replace this team, we're going to outsource everything to, I don't know, wherever. The interactions are not going to be the same. And not just because of time zones or language barriers or cultural barriers. Their interactions are just going to be different. And that's going to have ramifications on the system. They might turn out to be positive or not. They're going to be complex no matter what, because people are involved.
Right.
Very nice.
And with a system, you have dependencies. So I love analogies. So I'm going back to the car. In order to get the car running, you have a dependency on the battery. And then that's how everything starts to work. And so, and within a system, you mentioned the PO earlier. So in some organizations, you have PO, PM, but then you have designers. So to your point, and even engineering and product, like they have to come together to collaborate within that ecosystem that is the agile system, I suppose. Is that kind of how it's
even
framed?
if it's not agile, right? I mean, in agile, it's a bit of a given, or should be, but ultimately, and I wrote the book this way, I'm not assuming that the reader uses agile or whatnot.
Yeah, okay.
Ultimately, if you are delivering, conceiving, making, and delivering a product that matters to the company via its customers, then who's involved in that? And what I want people to do is to treat this thing holistically. Now, they may be managing it kind of functionally. Somebody manages engineers and another person manages BAs. Another one might manage designers. But if they work together on wherever there's decisions to make so that the decisions benefit the entire system, right? So for instance, the triad model is a classic example of that.
Right.
But we don't even need to go that far. I mean, it's not really a radical invention. It's a great invention. It gives name to something that's very important. 20 years ago, we just called it talk to your colleagues.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right. So I want you talking to your colleagues, not just about the deliverables that you do anyway. I want you talking to your colleagues about how are we going to get those deliverables out there?
Right.
How are we going to make them and deliver them?
Yeah.
As opposed to treating different functions or specialties as upstream from each other, which is typically what happens with product. Product is upstream of engineering, and engineering is upstream of sometimes QA, unless they're together, which they should be, and upstream of delivery and customer support and whatnot. Okay, because again, system decisions here have results there.
Yeah. In a car, it's a much easier system to identify because you see the edges of the car, you see what's in the car, what's outside of the car. The more the car is smart these days, it has all of these components that are smart on their own, and they have to interact with each other, integrate with each other. And they also could interact with external components, whether it is through some physical connections or some internet connections, or whatever it is. With these systems, it's much more complex because you will have multiple teams and multiple managers, and the managers could be in multiple systems because they have to make decisions for different products. It depends how you dice and slice it in the organization, right?
Of course. So here's the thing. The way I see it, the prime responsibility of managers is to manage the system. Managing the individuals is a portion of that.
Right.
The other portion is managing how the work works, right? What the organization makes possible, what the organization makes difficult, how resources are divided, by which I do not mean people, all of that.
Yeah.
That's what managers are there to do. Now, you might say, well, if we have, let's say, project managers, they have a different focus, but even project managers, they are accountable for the deliveries of a group that is, you can't help it. It is cross-functional.
Yeah. So I don't think we mentioned the name of the book. The book is called...
We haven't.
Yeah, the book is called Deliver Better Results, How to Unlock Your Organization's Potential. And the system is just the starting point of that. You're actually lining up a fitness model for a system in the book with 6 specific criteria. And let's dive into that a bit now.
Okay.
And then you have levels that you can identify. This system is in this level based on these fitness criteria. And then strategies how to move from one level to the other. So I find that really an amazing process, and you even have a name for that, right?
Yes, which is an acronym because I really like acronyms. So I just call it SQUARE.
Who doesn't?
Yes.
Right. So let's talk about that. So we have this system. It produces something that makes a difference to the company. How well it does that is how fit it is. Okay. So again, to use an analogy, how healthy am I? The purpose being, can I do what I want? Can I walk, run, climb mountains, pick up my kids, whatever? Okay. So how do we assess fitness for purpose? How do we assess that this system, which is usually dozens of people, and how they work? How do we assess that it is fit for the purpose of helping the company, achieve its objectives? I have seen various models in the industry so far, and a lot of them have to do with compliance to some expected method, like Scrum, Kanban, SAFe, what have you.
Yeah.
And the question there is, how well do we follow what the framework says? But I wanted a model that is framework agnostic, because first off, none of these frameworks might be specifically perfect for you.
Right.
And let's face it, most companies, they do their own thing, which might be a mishmash. So unless they are extremely focused and specific and intentional on, for instance, Kanban, the Kanban maturity model is not going to help them much, right? So I was looking for a model that we can say, okay, no matter how you've organized, no matter your process, how can we know that it is fit for purpose? And so the aspects, you call them criteria, aspects, it's the same thing, have to do with how is this thing performing, its performance really, with respect to the company's needs. So there are 6 such criteria. For instance, to what extent does it actually achieve valuable outcomes? Another one is the timeliness of its deliveries. So it doesn't matter if it hits deadlines. What matters is when it delivers something that's supposed to be valuable, do the people on the receiving end still see it as valuable? Okay, so there's that. We're not going to go into the 6 of them, but what I really like about this about this model is how you actually assess fitness. And I came up with something that I wanted heads of product, heads of engineering, senior people who don't have time to be able to do this in 10 minutes.
Nice.
It might be 20 minutes the first time because you need to understand the thing. But if you come back to it, it takes 10 minutes to get an assessment of how fit is our thing.
It might take you longer to read it because it depends how fast you read, right?
And the section came out really long because I gave so many examples.
Which is good. And
of course.
That actually goes to my next question, because I think in my mind, when I was thinking about it and when I read through that, the hardest thing for me was to the measurement. How do I measure my fitness aspect in the right way?
And that's why I gave the examples, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But even with the examples, maybe it's me. Maybe it's something with me that I want to be very accurate, or I'm always looking at all the different angles and there is so much complexity. So how can I simplify it into just one number? Or in this case, it's far, midway, and near, I believe, right?
Yes.
For each one of those.
Yeah. So let's tell our listeners. And look, anytime you have some, let's call it assessment tool, right? The first time you see it, you would hesitate. Am I doing this right? Do I strongly agree or do I agree? Right? You know, the Likert scales and whatever.
Yes.
No matter what you do, it's going to be hard. So I didn't want, a 5-point scale or 7 or a 10, right? So for each fitness aspect, you have 3 options. The first thing you do is you think about the optimum. What would be best for us? Not what's best for Google or Facebook, what's best for us.
Yes.
Okay?
Yep.
So for instance, in terms of solving user problems and achieving business outcomes, what's the ideal that we could possibly hope for? Okay? So you think about that. The next thing you think about is, okay, how are we right now? And you don't need metrics. You don't need to run big surveys. I have tested this with dozens of leaders. They know.
Yeah.
They know. And maybe they need a little bit of, prompting for me, like coaching prompts, which is, again, why I gave the examples in the book and all of those other bullet points there.
Right.
Okay, so once you know your optimum and your current state, you simply say, how is the current state relative to the optimum? And the first question you ask is it so far away from it that it's just constantly an issue? Like it comes up in management meetings, and management's upset, and people are upset, or they should be upset. They're not.
There is enough indicators to say this is far from what we are trying to get, where we are trying to be.
Yeah, like for instance, for the timeliness aspect, again, it's not about hitting deadlines, but you can say our optimum is that we deliver our product when the customers can use it. Guess what? We're always late by a lot, and they get mad. We lose business, retention's bad, whatever, right? All the product issues that you know about.
Yep.
It's bad. So it's far. One is far from the other. That's it. Now you jump to the other extreme. Is the current state near enough that it's practically good enough? We're never going to hit the optimum, but we don't need to, but it's close enough. Doesn't come up. Not an issue. We deliver on time, even when we're a month late, but nobody cares.
Right.
Fine. And then if it's neither far nor near, it's midway. That's it. I don't need you to be more specific. So they don't actually come out necessarily as thirds in a sense. Like far takes the lower third and near takes the top third. Not really. But it works. So you do this to the 6 aspects. And again, it takes 10 minutes.
For our audience, let me mention the 6 aspects over there. But I do encourage you to buy the book. It's already been released on January 23rd. So you should have access to that. But you already mentioned timeliness. There is also adaptability, throughput, and outcomes. And then the other 2 is consistency, which is across all the other 4, as well as cost efficiency, which is all the other 4 plus consistency. So it's a really great model. I really liked how you put it together. By the way, how did you come up with that? You're speechless.
No, look, this portion of the model I developed more than a year and a half ago. I don't remember the exact detail, but it's not like they came down to me from heaven.
So it's over time through your experience.
Yes, and because I've worked with over 100 organizations, and so I got to see so many things. So I could test this model initially before bugging people and see if things made sense or not.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I really liked your point about keeping it simple, because we've all seen these frameworks. There's a million of them out there, and they overcomplicate things. So I always kind of go along with keep it simple, stupid. We as humans overcomplicate everything if we're allowed to. So your idea of keeping it simple is great, and I also like your analogy around we know what our bodies, our systems are doing, and if we're observant enough and we take the time to really think about, like, okay, I know my body hurts. I know I can't walk as far to do this. Like, we all know this already. We're not always able to admit it. I mean, maybe that's some of the struggle as well within companies. Like, we know we're struggling, but we're not always willing to admit where. And so being cognitive of that is important.
Yes. And I want to say something about this, because somebody asked me the other day if I don't expect users of the model to game it and to be overly flattering to themselves and say, throughput, we're good on throughput, and outcomes, of course. I mean, that actually reminds me of like one of my very first client meetings. It must have been 20 years ago, even more. And I was sitting with the VP Eng and a director, and the director, he's all, we're good. We deliver on time. And at some point, the VP lost it, and he turned to him and he said, what are you talking about? We're always late, always. Right? So here's the thing. If you go through this assessment and let's say you overrate things or you underrate things because you think everything's broken, everything's a disaster, we suck at everything, it's all far. I've had people do that too. Here's what will happen. Once you're done doing the far and near midway for each of the 6, there's some scary math involving 1, 2, and 3. In order to come up with the bottom line, which is what's our level of fitness, 1 through 5. The point of it is not to show you how great you are. The point of it is to tell you what you should do now. So if it came out saying you're at level 3, you should be looking at the strategies that are specifically indicated for level 3 in order to get to level 4. But if it came out saying level 4, and in reality you're level 2, and you're going to do the level 4 things, they're not going to help you much.
Yes, you're not doing justice to yourself.
Exactly. Yep. So again, using the analogy, if what I want to do is, let's say, be able to run a half marathon, let's say, okay, what are the fitness aspects that are necessary for that? Well, there is stamina. There is some form of ability to run. I can't be carrying too much weight, things like that. I can tell myself all the lies I want. It's not going to help me run a half marathon.
Right. So
That's
honesty is very important, and part of it is being honest in an organization that might not encourage honesty, or managers that are too afraid to be honest because they might not look good, right? But that's actually some of the reasons why their fitness is not that great. Because if that is their approach, then their approach is also in other places like that.
Could be. So look, what I hope is for an organization that is interested to have a team, I call them the improvement leaders, to just come together and say, okay, we're taking responsibility for making things better. It's not necessarily C-levels. The C-levels should give their blessing, but it's quite often middle management, program managers, maybe an architect, maybe a resident coach. It's a bunch of people from different disciplines. The first thing I want them to do is to do this assessment individually. So maybe they read this chapter together. And by the way, we're going to give our listeners the chapter. And they do this independently. So everybody thinks, okay, for throughput, what I think, for timeliness, what I think, and so on. And then they compare notes. When they do that, one of two things will happen. One is it all comes out the same, which is great. It means they kind of see things the same way. So it should be relatively easy going forward. The other option is that they actually don't agree. And usually what they don't agree about is what the optimum is like. Second thing being, we don't agree on the current state, which would be strange, but fine. But then that exposes misalignment. So by comparing these notes, you can say, all right, so all of us want to improve things. Now let's talk about our differences in understanding and perception so that we actually aim towards the same thing. And that is why it is so important that the group is very diverse, right? Because if you only had engineering leaders there, they would talk your head off about continuous delivery, right? And multiple times per day and pipelines and such. But if what they're delivering is A, unsafe, or B, unwanted, that's not helping anybody. So you need product people there, right? If you have people who oversee the portfolio, you want them there, and so on.
Yeah. The one challenge that I've seen in the past is even get to that stage that there is an agreement that it needs to be done. So you were talking already that, yes, a few people in the organization can take it on themselves to do, and there is some agreement that we want to improve. But I've been to situations that I knew things needs to be done. Other people knew things to be done, but no one really took the initiative to do them, or they didn't feel they have the safety to actually do it bottom up, and they were waiting for the okay from top down.
Yeah, and that's how it's been for the past 15 years. When I started in Agile, people talked about guerrilla Agile, like really kind of bottom up. People see the need. We're going to start writing tests. We're going to deploy and blah, blah, blah. Okay, that changed. It changed once, Scrum became so popular and once management caught wind of what we were doing and all of that. And that's fine. It is fine because the role of management is to manage the system. So if you have management in a system that is not seeing the need to improve things, or can't be bothered, or is simply hamstrung and just can't do any of it, nothing will help them. Right? And things will kind of stay as they are, and fitness will erode over time because systems just progress that way.
And they will continue complaining.
And people will leave, and then fitness will erode even more. And at some point, somebody will come in and say, oh, we need a transformation. We need a new leader, and this and that. That is preventable.
Nice. Now, you mentioned those 5 levels before.
Yes.
And then you have also a strategy to apply to move from one level to the other.
Yes.
Which is also like great because now you have actionable things to do to move to the next one.
Yes.
Sometimes when I read that, I wasn't sure. I probably have to internalize it a bit more and see it in action, but I wasn't sure why one strategy in a specific level jump versus another strategy, or maybe this strategy could be actually not from level 2 to 3, but from level 3 to 4. So the order of things and stuff like that.
Yes. So the strategies are, first off, they're incremental, which means that if you're at level X, you do what's indicated for level X. You need to get it to a point where it's kind of baked in. For instance, one of the strategies in level 1 to get to level 2 is to manage your project portfolio. That's not a single event. It's something you'll need to start doing and get pretty good at and consistent at. I mean, you will slip on occasion, fine, but you'll need to keep managing your project portfolio or your roadmap, if that's the term you use, so that teams have a chance of finishing stuff.
Yeah.
And not just being busy.
Yeah.
That's an example of why that strategy is early on. So they are incremental, they build on each other. And from that standpoint, one is a prerequisite for another. So managing the project portfolio is pretty much a prerequisite for everything else. Designing your way of working, like setting up your process and your team structure or team topology, that is a prerequisite for stabilizing their flow of work, right? Because if your team are misaligned to their mission, you can't stabilize that properly, right? You're going to have too many dependencies and wait states and whatnot. There are some strategies that when I considered like where to put them, I was a little bit surprised that they ended up in one of the later ones. For instance, at level 4, which is already respectable, right?
Yes.
Very respectable. At level 4, and by the way, let's just define it for our listeners. A level 4 system is both effective and efficient. The issue with it is that it's slower to achieve major outcomes than it needs to be. Like maybe you need to move to the next generation of a platform and people are just spinning their wheels or they can't decide, or whatever.
So timeliness and outcomes is slow.
Regular outcomes are okay. Big outcomes, not as much. Yes. And you're hurting on the timeliness for them. Exactly. Yes.
Right.
Okay.
So one of the strategies at level 4 is to reduce the technical cost of change, by which I mean, anytime you need to make changes to your product, technical changes, like you actually move code from left to right, then you need to make this affordable. Now, some people will be hearing this and say, isn't he talking about paying down tech debt? Well, kinda, but not entirely, because the cost of change plays out in various forms. But the big deal with this strategy is to make change affordable. Lower level strategies made it affordable by not starting redundant stuff, by collaborating more, so you did more correct things and less wrong things. But when it comes to the construction of your product or whatever deliverable you have, we need to make further construction affordable. And you might say, well, why is this level 4? I mean, don't engineering leaders know to do this earlier? Well, here's the answer. They do. They absolutely do. And if they try it at lower levels, it doesn't stick. This is based on, again, primarily my experience, but I've tested this with so many people so far. So for instance, in a level 2 system where things are kind of, let's call it awkward. They're not broken, but they're kind of awkward. Like a lot of really struggling Scrum implementations are level 2. You can work with your developers on, here's how you write tests, and here's how you refactor code. And believe me, I've done this plenty, and it doesn't stick. They like it, they love it, they want to do it, and then they tell me, no, we have some sprint thing to accomplish.
There's higher priorities.
We have other priorities. I can't do this. We need permission from management. Can they give us time? Can they give us 10%? And people do this for a month, 2 months, 3 months, and then they realize
they go back to
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like emptying the thing with the thimble instead of a bucket. It's just not going to go.
But in level 4, because they have all the other discipline on other
Yes,
things and capacity to do it,
exactly.
then it does
Yes.
stick.
They have
Think
enough
about,
traction.
yes, exactly. So think about it this way. At level 1 and 2, you're generally trying to make ends meet. The present is more important than the future. Now, every leader knows, especially the really senior ones, they know the present is not enough. You need to think about the future, but there's only so much capacity, only so much. So when you get to the higher levels, it means that you're dealing with the present well enough that you can afford to think about the future without hurting the present. Now, I'm not saying build for the future, unless that's what you happen to need to do, but you're able to make decisions now that will make your future better. It's like, if you barely make ends meet, are you going to save for your retirement? Well, ideally you should, but realistically, do people do that? Not as much as they should.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
First, they need to kind of get out of the hole.
Focus on the present.
Yeah. So that's just an example. I mean, every strategy is in the level that it is in order to level up because it needs the previous ones in place, which is why, by the way, the big recommendation to organizations is once you've assembled this team, right, of improvement leaders, and let's say you've done the assessment and you all agree on what your optimums look like and you have a good read on your current fitness level, you need to look at the strategies from the previous levels and see that they are in fact baked in. Because if they're not, your current level is not going to be sustainable anyway. Don't even bother trying to go further.
Yeah. So you cannot jump, and you have to sustain the previous things that you got to that level on a regular basis, and make sure that you're still there.
Yes.
And it's a habit, really.
It's a habit which is sustained by having a bunch of smart people working together and working regularly. So in a way, what this model describes is, yes, it's fitness for purpose, but we can also use the term health, right? It's the same as trying to get healthier. I'm not going to get healthier by first eating less because I want to lose weight.
Right.
And I'm not going to get healthier just by walking 10K every day because I'm not going to be able to sustain it. I need to do some of every little thing and some things more at this step and some things more at that step in order for me to be in a position to even do anything.
Yep. The running analogy, if you want to run a marathon, you start off with wherever you're comfortable at. I need to walk before you run. Eventually I get further and further. So
yes. So my model is how you would get there gradually. Absolutely. Which is, by the way, also different from many of the established models in our field, which are either here's the target state, apply it, or look for the worst offenders, fix them. It might be the theory of constraints. It might be who's your weakest link, your bottom 5%. It could be a whole bunch of stuff. Plug the leaks, right? I think, look, I love the theory of constraints, but one problem I have with it is that we have no idea how things will turn out. And I wanted to give people something that is more concrete in terms of like when you're at level 3, things generally kind of look like, people in teams do actually talk to each other. When you put things through the system, you can expect when they'll come out and it will actually happen within, tolerance. Every decision will have a home. Things will generally be okay. But I can also tell you that when you're at level 3, your biggest risk is that you have a key person risk. They have several decision makers who make all the important decisions. And if they leave, good luck.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we may have all been there, I think, at some point, right? So
yes. And I think that without a system like that, I've tried both approaches. I've tried to here is the religious thing to do, let's just do it, and try to convert everyone to that. And I also try to fix gaps and say, this is the place where we hurt the most, let's try to fix that. But what I like about your system is that it gives you that directional process to evaluate where you are and where you want to go, and not try to jump on hurdles you cannot jump, but do it in baby steps first, and then learn how to do it, and then continue.
Yeah. So, I'm thinking about fixing the problems. Because we work in a system, every time we fix a problem number 2 gets a promotion, right? Now, we don't even know ahead of time which is going to be problem number 2, but we're sure to have one. And sometimes we wouldn't even know. So let me give you an example. The way I manage my health and my diet this year is way different than where I was a year ago, because I found a program that actually works systemically. But a year ago, one thing I wanted to do is to eat less pastries. Now think about it. Sounds like a net positive, right? But when I eat less pastries, what happens as a result? Well, I get a little less sugar, so maybe I get it other places now that I don't want either. Or there is something about the habit. It was not a daily thing, but maybe there was something about the habit that made me feel good, and now I'm cranky. Maybe I ate my pastries at a coffee shop with my wife or with a friend, and now we're not doing that anymore. So now I'm less with people, and now I'm a bit upset. See, system effects everywhere.
Right.
So plugging holes is not necessarily the best way to go either.
Oh, that's fascinating. Now, the name of the book is quite generic on any organization potential, but the core of the framework is more towards delivery of products, and mostly software products. Maybe
No,
I'm
you're
just
right.
coming.
You're right. I don't necessarily say software. I say technology because for the most part that's software, but still.
Technology. True.
Yes. So can every organization use it? Probably not. But technology organizations, specifically ones that develop, right? That develop technology, even if what they think of develop is a whole bunch of people onshore and an outsourced troop elsewhere, that doesn't matter. It's still development. It's yours. It's a system with its own parameters. This is for you, right?
And any size as well? Any size company as well?
Any size. So if you're a startup, it's so easy to do because everybody's in the same place. You just get together and talk. If you're a bigger company, you have several teams, you might still have a single value delivery system because you effectively have a single product. So you just solve for that. The bigger you are, the likelier it is that you have 2 or more systems. Maybe you have one system that's doing research or innovation and another one that is simply maintaining a successful product. Those are 2 systems. I've had clients where their systems are actually, and it sounds a little bit funny, but they're actually broken down by backend and front end because it's not the backend and front end of quite the same product, right? It's like, if the front end is actually a piece of hardware and the backend is all the management and central station type of thing and so on, they tend to be different systems with interfaces. Again, it's which movie are you making? That's really what it is.
Absolutely.
But I do want to emphasize something here. In our space, we tend to have books for engineering, books for product, some books for design, not a lot, but some books for delivery, some for management, and very few for everybody. This is a for everybody. So it's not like this book is for the head of engineering and hopefully they get product to run along with them. No. And it's not a book just for product and hopefully engineering comes along. No. It's for both of them to work together. And actually several examples in the book from companies that actually did that. And honestly, it doesn't take a whole lot.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I read that example of a company that done that in like 8 months or something like that.
10 months, yes.
10 months. And it seems like really great example. And I could resonate with some stories of my experience or things I've seen in the past about different stages where they were and stuff like that based on different companies that I work. So if I would put all these companies together, maybe they will get to level 5. But it's really great to see a story like that, for sure.
Yes. And by the way, if anybody listens to us, reads the book and says, I have a story for you, please let me know. I'm sure there will be a
Great.
second edition,
Great.
or the book comes with those supplementary resources online. I can just put it up there with credit to the person. So the story I have in the book, in the appendix that you're referring to, they went from level 1 to 4 in 10
Right.
months. That's a product company, about 50 people, most of whom were actually part of the system. They had very few other functions. I would love to include an example from internal development, IT, from a bank or insurance company or something. I actually do have a story from a client I had at one of the Canadian banks. They did super well, but I kind of used that story piecemeal throughout the book. So well, not throughout, like
Yeah.
3,
Yeah.
4 pieces. That's it.
Yeah.
So I couldn't use it again.
Right. For sure. Yeah. If anyone listen and they will do that, that will be amazing to know. Where can people buy the book?
So people can buy the book pretty much anywhere books are sold online. There's a website for it, deliverbetterresultsbook.com. And we're going to give our listeners chapter 1, which is both, it's post-WD, so it's both foundation for the rest of the book, but also summary of the key ideas there. And I'm going to give you the URL for this. It's in English.
Excellent.
It's heard on podcast.deliverbetterresultsbook.com.
Okay. So it's this is for all this is a great idea. I love that.
Yeah.
So
really
every person that hear this on a podcast, can we put it in our
In
description?
show notes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course. At least they'll get the chapter, and I hope it makes a difference.
Perfect.
That's right.
Perfect. No,
that's great. And
this...
that kind of leads into the last question that I had. If someone does pick up the book, reads the first chapter, and want to get started, like what would be the first point of starting this process that you would recommend?
Okay, so the book does mention this, but I'll share with everybody here. Again, it's get with your colleagues who are taking responsibility for improvement. And some of them might be just, so excited for the idea. Others might just be tasked with that because it's in their, I don't know, yearly objectives or OKRs or what have you. So you get with them, you do the present state analysis, again, using the assessment from chapter 1. Then you look at your lower level strategies. Are they in place? And how well? And then and if they're not, you work on that in a in numerical sequence. Because again, they're sequential and incremental. And then you get to your current level strategies, which, by the way, I should point out is the exact same thing you would do if your company were suddenly growing very fast. Okay. Maybe this year you're hiring 20%. That will actually knock down your fitness.
Yes.
Because the system needs to organize. Right. And maybe throughput, I mean, you have more bodies, and I shudder as I say that, right? Maybe throughput is a little better, but maybe timeliness not because of coordination. I don't know. Things could break down so many different ways.
Yeah.
So you do your current state assessment. And again, you look from level 1, 2, 3 until you get back on track. It's going to be super easy compared to the first time. But still, that's really what you would do.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So as your velocity is picking up, you're keeping the team aligned and growing along with you. So yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, you could be hiring 20% more people and slowing things down terribly because of coordination and dependencies.
Another scenario I could think about is like when you merge with another company. Like,
totally.
Like things are changing. There is fear also in the air sometimes with, keeping my position, not keeping my position. But then also some areas of the operation, sometimes they have overlaps, so they condense them and put them together. Sometimes they keep the organization independent, sometimes they don't. So there is a lot of that going on.
Yes, and look, again, system, which is inside a bigger system.
Yes.
So not everything will be in your control. Some things will blindside you. Who knows, right? But to the extent you can affect the system you're in and you understand it enough to deal with it holistically and like with integrity, then this is what you would do to make things better.
I keep thinking about biological systems and stuff like that, cells and stuff. So this is a night of analogies. So
Well, that's interesting because biological systems, they self-organize, right? There's usually not some entity that says, we are going there.
Oh, yeah, right.
Right? We have consciousness, so we can.
Right.
We don't always do it all that well.
Yep.
But we have the consciousness to say, we are like this, we should be like that. Now, we might choose to achieve it via some self-organization, what we might call empowerment, but still,
Yep.
we also put our foot in it too often.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a great conversation, Gil. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
I've had the best time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for that, Gil. Really, really appreciate it. Is there anything else you would like to add before we close up?
No, it's all good.
Awesome.
I would love to hear from people. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Tell me where you heard me.
Yeah, so where can people reach out to you?
On LinkedIn. There's only one Gil Broza, or my website, which is 3pvantage.com. It's a corporation, but it's by and large me.
Excellent.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Gil. And I really enjoyed reading the book, and I'm going to start recommending it to people and see where I can apply it. And best of luck. Selling books is always like this additional challenge, but I'm sure that on the fourth,
it's a product, right?
It's a product, exactly. But I'm sure on the fourth one, you already have some lessons from the first three, right? So
okay, so one thing we know from one of the fathers of system thinking, Deming, is that experience is not worth a whole lot.
Interesting.
Okay, yes. But yeah, I'm definitely in the go-to-market now, and it's interesting. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Gil.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you all the listeners, and we'll talk to you next time. Thank you to all the listeners. We really appreciate the feedback and support. Please leave us a review to help others find the show on Apple or Spotify or anywhere else you're listening to the show.